This is WKRL 94.7, and if you are hearing this, I need you to understand something right away. I am not a professional broadcaster. I am not with any news organization. I am just a man who worked the overnight engineering shift at this radio station because it paid better than the night shift at the warehouse, and because I liked the quiet. My name is Charles, and I am sitting alone in a control room that smells like coffee that has been sitting too long and dust that has been settling since the 1970s. The time is approximately 11:47 p.m. on what I believe is a Tuesday, though I cannot be entirely sure anymore. The clocks on the equipment are frozen, and the wall clock ran out of battery 2 days ago. I have been marking the days on a notepad with a pencil, but I might have lost count. It is hard to keep track when there is no sunrise to tell you when one day ends and another begins. The sky outside the windows is the same shade of gray it has been for what feels like a very long time, and the city below is dark in a way that I have never seen before. No streetlights, no car headlights, no glowing windows in the apartment buildings across the way. Just darkness, and that peculiar stillness that settles over a place when the hum of electricity goes silent. The transmission started 3 days ago, or maybe it was 4. I had been sitting here in the dark, just listening to the silence, when I realized the emergency transmitter might still work. It is an old model, one of the last of its kind, the sort of thing that was designed to survive exactly this kind of situation. I had never actually used it before. I had only been trained on it once, years ago, by a man named Jerry who retired and moved to Florida, and probably never expected any of this to happen. I remember him telling me that if everything else went dark, this little transmitter would keep going. He said it with a kind of pride, like he had built something that would outlast the rest of the world. I think about Jerry now, wondering if he made it to Florida in time, wondering if there is any Florida left to make it to. When I first turned it on, I expected nothing. I expected the same dead air that had been filling the building for days, but there was a hum, a faint electrical hum that I had almost forgotten the sound of. And then there was a light on the panel, a soft green glow that seemed impossibly bright in the darkness of that control room. I sat there for a long time, just staring at that light, trying to understand what it meant. I had been alone for so long by that point, alone in this building with nothing but the sound of my own breathing and the occasional creak of the old structure settling around me, that the presence of that light felt like finding another person in the room. I am talking to you now, whoever you are, because I have to believe someone is listening. I have to believe that this signal is reaching someone out there in that darkness, someone who is as confused and frightened as I am, someone who needs to hear another human voice just to remember what it sounds like. I have been turning this over in my mind for days, trying to decide if broadcasting my voice out into the void is a kindness or a cruelty. Is it better to hear a voice and know that someone else is still alive, or is it better to sit in silence and be spared the hope of connection? I still do not know the answer to that question, but I have decided to speak anyway, because silence is its own kind of death, and I am not ready for that yet. The last thing I remember clearly before the world went quiet was the sound of the evening news. I was in the break room, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the ancient machine that has been hissing and sputtering in this station for longer than I have been alive. The news was on the television in the corner, a small screen with a rabbit ear antenna that barely picked up any signal on a good day. The newscaster was talking about tensions, about diplomatic breakdowns, about the kind of distant geopolitical conflicts that always felt like they belonged to someone else's world. I was not paying close attention. I was tired, and the coffee was weak, and I had 3 more hours of my shift to get through before I could go home and sleep. Then the lights flickered, not dramatically, not like in the movies, just a brief hesitation, a moment of uncertainty in the electrical current that made the fluorescent tubes buzz and dim. I looked up at the television, and the signal was gone. Snow. Static. That gray static that is not really gray at all, but 1,000 tiny specks of black and white dancing against each other. I walked out of the break room to check the main transmitter, to see if something had gone wrong with our equipment, and that was when I noticed the sound, or rather the absence of sound. The low hum of the building, the constant background noise of fans and machinery and electrical current, had stopped, just stopped. I stood in the hallway, listening to nothing, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I tried my phone first. That is what everyone does, right? They reach for their phone, expecting it to work, expecting the world to still be there on the other end of the line. My phone was dead, not out of battery, dead. The screen would not light up, no matter how many times I pressed the button. I tried the landline in the control room, the old rotary phone that has been bolted to the wall since before I was born. Nothing, no dial tone, just that same oppressive silence that seemed to be filling the entire building. I walked outside. I do not know why. Maybe I thought I would see something that made sense. The parking lot was full of cars, and none of them were moving. Some of them had their doors open, like people had simply stepped out and walked away. The street beyond was the same. Cars stopped in the middle of the road. A delivery truck, its back doors hanging open, had come to a halt at the intersection. There was a bicycle lying on its side on the sidewalk, as if the person riding it had simply vanished into thin air. The sky was clear, a perfect blue that seemed indifferent to whatever had just happened below it. There was no smoke, no fire, no debris, just silence and stopped vehicles, and a world that had suddenly forgotten how to move. I went back inside. I locked the door behind me, which felt like a pointless gesture, but made me feel slightly better. I walked through the building, checking every room, calling out for anyone who might still be there. I found nobody. The night crew had been small to begin with, just me and the overnight news anchor, a woman named Patricia, who always brought in her own tea because she said our coffee was undrinkable. She was not at her desk. Her tea mug was still there, half full, growing cold on the surface of her desk. A novel she had been reading was open to page 142, the spine cracked and worn from multiple readings. I closed the book, because leaving it open felt like leaving something unfinished, and that seemed disrespectful. I do not know what I expected to find. Maybe I expected the world to be normal again when I went back to the control room. Maybe I expected the lights to flicker back on and the phone to ring, and Patricia to walk in with her tea and ask me why I looked so pale, but none of that happened. The control room was still dark, still quiet, still the same empty space it had been when I left it. I sat down in my chair and stared at the dead equipment and tried to understand what had just happened. That was 3 days ago, or maybe it was 4. I have been marking the days on my notepad, but I am not sure I started at the right time. The pencil is getting dull, and I cannot find the sharpener. It is the small things that get to you, I have learned. Not the big questions about what happened, or who is responsible, or whether the world is ever going back to the way it was. It is the small things. The pencil that needs sharpening, the coffee that ran out yesterday, the silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat in a way you never did before. The emergency transmitter is a strange piece of equipment. It was designed in the 1950s, back when people still believed in things like civil defense and the importance of a clear broadcast in times of crisis. It is built like a tank, heavy and solid, with large knobs and switches that make satisfying clicks when you turn them. It does not rely on the same kind of microchips that power most modern electronics, which is why I think it survived whatever happened. Walter, the engineer I mentioned earlier, the one who trained me, used to call it a dinosaur. He said it was outdated and inefficient and would never be used in a real emergency. He was wrong about that. Or maybe he was right, and I am just a man sitting in the dark, talking to no one, pretending that my voice is reaching someone out there. I have been keeping the transmission running for about an hour now. I have mostly been listening, letting the hum of the old equipment fill the space around me. It is not a comfortable sound. It is a whine, really, a high-pitched buzz that drills into your skull if you let it, but it is better than silence. It is proof that something is still working, that the world has not stopped completely. I have been thinking about what to say, how to start this conversation with whoever might be listening. I have decided to tell the truth. That is all I have left to give. The truth about what I saw, what I know, what I am afraid of. I do not know what happened. I do not know if this is a war, or an accident, or something else entirely. I do not know if help is coming, or if we have been abandoned. I know only that the power is gone, and the silence is immense, and I am sitting in a radio station with a working transmitter and a story to tell. I know that the sky above this city is the same gray it has been for days, with no planes, no birds, no sign of anything moving through it. I know that I have not seen another living person since the moment I stepped outside and found the world frozen around me. I know that I am afraid, Not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but the slow, creeping fear of uncertainty. The fear of never knowing what happened. The fear of being alone in a world that has gone silent. The fear of all the things I cannot see moving in the darkness beyond these windows. If you are listening to this, if you have found this signal, and you are sitting somewhere in the dark with a radio that still works, I need you to know that you are not alone. I am here. I am speaking. I am trying to find the words that will make sense of this, even though I do not have any answers. I am just a man with a radio and a voice, and a desperate need to connect with someone else who is still alive. This is WKRL 94.7. The time is approximately 12:15 a.m. on what I believe is a Wednesday. My name is Charles, and I am going to keep broadcasting for as long as this transmitter holds out. I am going to tell you what I see, what I hear, what I remember, and I am going to ask you, whoever you are, to keep listening. Keep listening and know that somewhere in this darkness, there is still a voice reaching out. I have been sitting in this chair for what feels like hours now, staring at the same gray walls, listening to the same hum of the transmitter, and I have begun to notice things I did not notice before. The building has a voice of its own, a collection of sounds that I was too distracted to hear in the first days of silence. There is the creak of the old wooden floorboards in the hallway outside the control room, the way they groan and settle as the temperature shifts. There is the drip of a leaky faucet somewhere in the break room, a steady rhythm that I have started to count without meaning to. There is the wind, when it blows, pressing against the windows and finding small gaps in the seals that I never knew existed. These sounds were always here, I realize. They were just buried beneath the constant drone of machinery, the buzz of fluorescent lights, the distant noise of the city outside. Now that all of that is gone, the building has become a different place, full of small voices that speak in their own language. I find myself listening to them more carefully than I ever listened to anything before. I find myself trying to interpret them, to understand what they are telling me. The building is settling. The building is cold. The building is not the safe place I thought it was. I have been exploring more of the station in the last few hours, partly because I cannot stand to sit still any longer, and partly because I am trying to understand how much of this place is still functioning. The emergency transmitter is not the only equipment that survived. There are other things too, smaller things, older things, that were built without the kind of delicate electronics that the EMP seems to have destroyed. The old AM backup system, which I have always thought of as a relic, is still intact. It is not as powerful as the FM transmitter, but it works, and I have been toying with the idea of trying to use it to reach a wider audience. If there are other survivors out there, people who have access to older radios, they might be able to pick up a signal on AM that they cannot get on FM. The problem is power. The emergency transmitter runs on a separate battery system, one that was designed to keep it operational for weeks in the event of a total grid failure. But the AM backup is plugged into the building's main electrical system, and that system is dead. I have been down to the basement 3 times now, looking at the old generator that sits in the corner like a sleeping animal. It is a diesel model, built long before anyone worried about emissions or fuel efficiency, and I think it might still work. I think if I had the right tools and enough fuel, I could get it running. But I do not have the tools, and I have no idea how much fuel is left in the tank. This is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night, the endless cycle of possibilities and limitations. I could do this, if only I had that. I could solve this problem, if only I knew how. The knowledge I have is incomplete, and the things I do not know seem to grow larger with every passing hour. I think about Jerry, the engineer who trained me, and I wonder if he would know what to do. I wonder if he would be able to get that generator running with nothing but his hands and his experience, and a stubborn refusal to give up. Jerry was like that. He would never admit that something was impossible. He would just keep working at it, trying one approach after another, until he found a solution, or until the problem defeated him completely. I have been trying to adopt that same attitude, but it is harder than it looks. I am not Jerry. I am not an engineer. I am a man who took a job because it paid the bills and because I liked being alone with my thoughts. I did not sign up for this. I did not prepare for this. I do not have the skills or the knowledge or the resilience that this situation demands. But I am here anyway, and I cannot walk away because there is nowhere to walk to. Around midday, or what I assume was midday, based on the light coming through the windows, I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. It was a sound I had not heard in days, a sound that did not belong to the building. It was a car engine, faint and distant but unmistakable. I stood very still in the hallway, straining to hear it more clearly, and for a moment I thought I was imagining it. But then it came again, a low rumble that seemed to be moving somewhere in the distance. I rushed to the window, pressing my face against the cold glass, trying to see past the empty streets and the stopped cars and the gray haze that hung over everything. There was nothing, just the same silent city, the same frozen tableau that had been there since the moment the world went quiet.
The engine sound faded, or maybe it had never been there at all. Maybe it was wishful thinking, my mind playing tricks on me, conjuring the sound of movement out of the silence because I desperately wanted to believe that something was still out there.
I stood at the window for a long time, waiting for the sound to return, but it never did. I have been thinking about the people who were here before all of this. Patricia, the news anchor, with her tea and her novel and her quiet presence that I had never really appreciated until she was gone. The night security guard, a man named Frank who always smelled like cigarettes and peppermint, who would sit in the lobby and read old magazines and never seemed to sleep. The cleaning crew that came in at 3 a.m., a trio of women who spoke to each other in a language I never learned, who would nod at me politely as they passed the control room and never once tried to make conversation. All of them are gone now. All of them left behind the small artifacts of their lives, the tea mugs and the magazines and the cleaning supplies, and walked out into a world that had stopped working. I think about where they might have gone. I think about whether they found shelter, whether they found each other, whether they are still alive somewhere in this darkness. I think about the possibility that I am the only one left, the last person in this city, with a voice and a transmitter and the stubborn will to keep talking. That thought is unbearable, and so I push it away, and I focus on the small sounds of the building, the drip of the faucet, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the transmitter that connects me to someone out there. I have been trying to remember the last time I had a real conversation with another person. Before the lights went out, before the world went silent, I had been isolated in a way I had not fully recognized. My job kept me at night, away from the rhythms of the world, away from the people who lived their lives in daylight. I would come home at dawn and sleep while the sun was up, and then I would wake in the evening and go back to work, and that cycle had become my entire existence. I had friends once, I think. I had people I would see on weekends, people I would talk to about things that were not work. But those connections faded, as connections do when you stop feeding them, and I let them go because it was easier than trying to maintain them. That feels like a luxury now. That feels like a world I took for granted, a world I assumed would always be there, waiting for me to come back to it. I did not know that the world could end so quietly. I did not know that everything could stop so completely, without warning or explanation. I did not know that I would be sitting in a radio station, talking to a void, trying to convince myself that someone out there was listening. I have decided to use the AM transmitter if I can find a way to power it. I have been looking through the storage rooms, searching for anything that might help. I found an old battery pack, the kind that was used in the 1970s for portable broadcasting equipment. It is heavy and outdated, and I have no idea if it still holds a charge. I found a coil of copper wire and a set of tools that I do not know how to use. I found a box of vacuum tubes, still wrapped in their original packaging, like relics from another era. These things are not useful to me, not directly, but they remind me that people built this place to last, that they planned for emergencies and contingencies, and the possibility that the world might go dark. I want to try to reach beyond this city. I want to know if there is anyone out there, anyone at all, who is still alive and thinking, and reaching back toward me. The FM transmitter is powerful enough to cover a good portion of the surrounding area, but I do not know how far the signal actually reaches. I do not know if the people who hear it are close enough to matter. The AM transmitter, if I can get it running, would reach much farther. It would carry my voice across state lines, across mountains, across whatever devastation lies beyond the horizon. I am going to work on this tomorrow, or today, or whatever day it is. I am going to try to get that generator running, or find another power source, or figure out a way to make this work. I am going to keep broadcasting, keep talking, keep reaching out, because the alternative is silence, and I have learned that silence is not peace. Silence is waiting. Silence is the space between heartbeats, the moment when you hold your breath and listen for something that never comes. I have been wondering what you are doing right now. Whoever you are out there, listening to this. Are you alone? Are you with others? Are you safe? I realize I do not know anything about you. I do not know your name or your age or where you are. I do not know if you are sitting in a dark room with a battery-powered radio, or if you are in a shelter, or if you are walking through the empty streets of a city that looks like mine. I do not know if you are afraid, or angry, or resigned to whatever comes next. But I know you are there. I have to believe you are there. Otherwise, this is just a man talking to himself in an empty building. And I am not sure I can accept that yet. I am not sure I am ready to accept that I am completely alone. So I am going to keep talking. I am going to tell you about the building and the sounds it makes. I am going to tell you about the window that faces the street, and the way the light looks different now, grayer and softer, like the world has been wrapped in cotton. I am going to tell you about Jerry, the engineer who trained me, and how he used to say that the most important thing in a crisis was to keep your hands busy. Keep working. Keep doing something. Do not let the fear freeze you. I think about that a lot now. I think about keeping my hands busy. Tomorrow I will try to start the generator. Tonight I will sit here and talk to you about the silence and the building and the small sounds that fill the space between my words. This is Charles, still broadcasting from WKRL 94.7, still talking, still waiting, still hoping that someone is listening. I was in the basement when I heard the knocking. I had been down there for most of the morning, staring at the generator, trying to remember everything Jerry had ever taught me about diesel engines. I had found a manual in one of the storage rooms, a thin booklet with yellowed pages and diagrams that looked like they had been drawn by hand. I was reading it by the light of a small battery-powered lantern when I heard it, a knocking sound, distinct and deliberate, coming from somewhere above me. I froze. The lantern flickered in my hand, casting strange shadows across the concrete walls. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The building makes so many sounds now, creaks and groans and little settling noises, that I have learned to ignore. But this was different. This was a pattern. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks. The kind of sound that is made by a hand, not by a building settling into its foundations. I set the manual down carefully, trying not to make any noise, and I listened. The knocking came again, louder this time, more urgent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, that same sound I have grown so accustomed to in the silence. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting on the cold concrete floor, and I made my way toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. I was not sure what I was afraid of. I had been hoping for contact, for some sign that I was not alone. But now that it was here, I found myself hesitating. The knocking was coming from the front door of the station, the heavy steel door that faced the street. I could see it from the top of the stairs, a dark rectangle at the end of the hallway. The windows beside it were grimy and let in only a sliver of gray light. The knocking stopped as I approached, and I stood there in the hallway, trying to decide what to do. I had locked the door on the first night, and I had not unlocked it since. I had not even thought about opening it. The building had become my fortress, my sanctuary, the only place in the world that felt even remotely safe. I reached for the lock, and then I stopped. There was a voice on the other side of the door, a man's voice, rough and tired, speaking through the metal. He said something I did not catch, something muffled and indistinct. I leaned closer to the door, my hand still resting on the lock, and I asked who was there. The man on the other side laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, not the kind that makes you step back and reconsider your choices. It was a laugh of relief, of exhaustion, of someone who had been walking for a very long time and had finally found a place that seemed safe. He told me his name was Marcus. He said he had been walking for 3 days. He said he had heard my broadcast on a small radio he found in an abandoned car, and he had followed the signal here. I opened the door. I do not know why I did it, not really. Maybe I was tired of being alone. Maybe I was tired of talking to a void and wondering if anyone was listening. Maybe I just needed to see another human face, to know that I was not the last person on earth. The door swung open, and there he was. A man in his 50s, I guessed, with a gray beard and eyes that looked like they had seen too much. He was wearing a heavy coat and carrying a backpack that looked like it had been put together from whatever he could find. He had a radio in his hand, a small portable model with a cracked casing, and a piece of tape holding the antenna together. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he smiled. It was a tired smile, a broken smile, the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. He said he was glad to see me. He said he had been afraid that he would find only empty buildings and silence. I invited him inside. I do not know if that was the right decision, but it was the only decision I could make. Marcus has been here for a few hours now. He is resting in the break room, sleeping on the old couch that I had been using as a bed. He told me some of his story before he fell asleep, and I have been turning it over in my mind ever since. He was a truck driver, long haul, the kind of job that takes you across state lines and keeps you away from home for weeks at a time. He had been on the road when it happened, driving through a stretch of highway that ran through farmland and small towns. He said the truck just died. No warning, no sputtering, just a sudden silence, and the dashboard going dark. He sat there for a long time, trying to get it to start again, until he accepted that it was not going to happen. He walked. He said that was all he could do. He walked through the farmland, past the stopped cars and the empty fields, looking for anyone who could tell him what had happened. He found a few people, here and there, but they were all as confused as he was. Nobody knew anything. Nobody had any answers. He kept walking, heading toward the city because he thought there might be more people there, more resources, more information. But the city was worse, he said. The city was a maze of stopped cars and empty streets, and the kind of silence that makes you want to scream. He found the radio in a car that had been abandoned on the side of the road. The car was old, a relic from the 1990s, and the radio still worked. He turned it on and he heard my voice. He said it was the first human voice he had heard in 3 days, the first sign that someone else was still alive and thinking and trying to make sense of things. He followed the signal through the empty streets, past the stopped cars and the broken windows and the doors that hung open like mouths, and he found this building. He found me. I have been thinking about what it means that he found me. I have been thinking about the responsibility that comes with being the voice on the radio, the person that people walk toward when the world goes dark. I did not ask for this role. I did not want it. But here I am, and here he is, and I cannot pretend that this is not happening. I cannot pretend that I am just a man talking to himself in an empty building. Marcus told me something else before he fell asleep. He said he saw things on the road, things that troubled him. He said he saw bodies. Not many, but enough to make him wonder how many people had died in those first few hours, how many people had simply stopped living when the world stopped working. He said he saw a family in a minivan, the parents in the front seats, 2 children in the back, all of them frozen in place like they had been turned to stone. He said he did not know if they were dead or just trapped, and he did not have the courage to find out. He walked past them, and he kept walking, and he has not stopped thinking about them since. I did not know how to respond to that. I still do not know. I have been lucky, in a way. I have not seen the worst of it. I have been in this building, safe behind these walls, insulated from the horrors that are waiting out there in the darkness. But I cannot stay here forever. I cannot pretend that the world outside is not happening. Marcus is here now, and that means the world has found its way to my doorstep, and I have to decide what to do about it. I have been thinking about Jerry again. Jerry, who trained me on the equipment and told me to keep my hands busy. Jerry, who always said that the most important thing in a crisis was to stay calm and think clearly. I am trying to do that now. I am trying to think clearly about what comes next. Marcus is sleeping in the break room, and I am sitting in the control room, watching the gray light outside the window and wondering how many more people are out there, walking through the darkness, searching for a voice to guide them. I have decided to try to start the generator tomorrow. Marcus said he has some experience with engines, and between the two of us, maybe we can figure it out. If we can get the AM transmitter running, we can reach more people. We can tell them that there is a place to go, a building with walls and a roof and a voice that is still speaking. We can give them something to walk toward. I do not know if that is the right thing to do. I do not know if inviting more people here is a kindness or a mistake. But I do know that I cannot keep this place to myself. I cannot sit here in the dark, hoarding the silence, pretending that the world outside does not exist. Marcus found me because I was speaking, because I was reaching out. And if I stop speaking, if I let the transmitter go silent, then I am just another person waiting in the dark for something that will never come. This is Charles, still broadcasting from WKRL 94.7. The time is now late afternoon, and the light outside is fading, and I am preparing for whatever comes next. Marcus and I spent the entire morning in the basement. He is a different kind of person than I am, more practical, more willing to get his hands dirty. While I stood there reading the manual for the generator, he was already on his knees, checking the fuel lines and inspecting the connections. He worked with a quiet efficiency that made me feel almost useless. I offered to help, and he handed me a wrench and pointed at a bolt that needed loosening. It was a small thing, but it felt good to be doing something, to be contributing in some small way to the work that needed to be done. The generator is older than either of us expected. It was installed in the 1970s, back when this station was first built, and it has been sitting in the basement ever since, waiting for a moment that never came until now. The manual says it is a diesel model, designed to run for days on a single tank of fuel. The fuel tank is still mostly full, which surprised both of us. Marcus said it looked like someone had been maintaining it, keeping it topped off and ready for an emergency. I thought about Jerry again, about how meticulous he was about everything, about how he probably filled that tank himself years ago and never told anyone. The problem was not the fuel, the problem was the starter. The battery that was supposed to turn the engine over was dead, completely drained after years of sitting idle. Marcus said we could try to jump it, but we did not have another vehicle or a working battery to use. We sat there in the dim light of the lantern, staring at the generator, trying to think of a solution. And then Marcus did something I would not have thought of. He opened the side panel and started looking at the starter mechanism itself, trying to figure out if there was a way to bypass the electrical system entirely. He found a manual crank, a heavy metal handle that was tucked away in a compartment I had not noticed. It was designed for exactly this situation, for starting the engine when the battery was dead. We had to take turns cranking it, each of us straining against the resistance, until finally the engine coughed and sputtered and then caught. The sound of it roaring to life was so loud in the confined space of the basement that I covered my ears. But it was a beautiful sound, the most beautiful sound I had heard in days. It was the sound of progress, of movement, of something that was working. The generator powered up the AM transmitter, just as I had hoped. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the control room, adjusting the settings, trying to find the right frequency. The signal is not as strong as the FM transmitter, but it reaches farther. I do not know exactly how far. I do not know if anyone is listening, but I am broadcasting now, on 2 frequencies, sending my voice out into the darkness in the hope that someone is out there waiting to hear it. Marcus has been exploring the building in his own way. He found a storage room I had not checked, a small space tucked away behind the break room that was filled with old supplies. There were boxes of canned food, the kind that lasts for years and never goes bad. There was a case of bottled water, dusty and warm but still sealed. There were blankets and first aid kits and a box of batteries that were too old to work but gave me hope that there might be others somewhere else. Marcus carried everything out into the main room, sorting through it like a man who had been hungry and was finally seeing a way to fill his stomach. We ate together for the first time. It was a strange experience, sitting across from someone in the dim light of the lantern, eating canned beans that tasted like metal and hope. We talked about small things, about the building and the equipment, and the garden we were planning to plant in the small patch of ground behind the station. Marcus said he used to have a garden when he was younger, before he started driving trucks and spending all his time on the road. He said he knew how to grow vegetables, how to prepare the soil and plant the seeds and keep the pests away. He said he could teach me if I wanted to learn. I said yes. I did not hesitate. I have been thinking about the garden ever since, about the possibility of growing something in this dead world, of watching green things push through the dark soil and reach toward the gray sky. It feels like a kind of defiance, like a refusal to accept that everything is over. The plants do not know that the world has ended. They will grow because that is what they do. They will reach for the light because that is what they have always done. Marcus and I went out to look at the garden space this evening. It is a small patch of ground behind the station, a patch that was once a parking lot but has been overtaken by weeds and grass. Marcus walked across it slowly, testing the soil with his fingers, looking up at the sky and squinting like he was trying to read something written in the clouds. He said the soil was not great, but it could be improved. He said we would need to dig it up and add some organic matter, maybe some compost from the weeds and grass we pulled out. He said it would take time, but it would be worth it. I stood there with him, looking at that patch of ground, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt hope. It was a small hope, a fragile hope, the kind of hope that could be crushed by a single bad day. But it was there, and I held on to it. I held on to it the way you hold on to a warm mug on a cold night, knowing that the warmth will not last, but enjoying it while it is there. Marcus told me more about his journey tonight. He told me about the people he met, the ones he passed, and the ones who passed him. He said there was a woman in a small town, a woman who was giving out food from her garden because she had more than she could eat, and she wanted to help. He said there was a man who had been a mechanic, a man who was trying to fix the cars that were still fixable, gathering them in a parking lot and working on them one by one. He said there were children, too many children, walking through the streets with no adults to guide them, looking for someone who would take them in. I asked him why he did not stay in that small town. I asked him why he kept walking, kept moving, when there was food and shelter and other people. He was quiet for a long time, and I thought he might not answer. But then he said that he did not belong there. He said that he was a traveler, that he always had been, that staying in one place felt wrong to him. He said he needed to keep moving, to keep searching, to find out what had happened, and whether there was any way to fix it. I understood that. I understood the need to keep searching, to keep moving, to refuse to accept that this was the end. I was doing the same thing, in my own way. I was sitting in this building, talking into a microphone, trying to find a connection to something beyond myself. I was searching, just like he was. The AM transmitter is working now. I do not know if anyone is listening on that frequency, but I am going to keep talking. I am going to tell whoever is out there about Marcus and the generator and the garden we are going to plant. I am going to tell them about the cans of food and the bottled water and the hope that is growing in my chest like a seed pushing through dark soil. I am going to tell them that there are still people in this world who are trying, who are refusing to give up. This is Charles, broadcasting from WKRL 94.7, and now on AM as well. The time is late evening, and Marcus is asleep in the break room, and I am sitting in the control room, listening to the hum of the equipment and thinking about tomorrow. I woke up this morning to the sound of the generator still running, that low rumble that has become the background music of my life. It is a comforting sound now, a reminder that something is still working, that we have not been completely abandoned by the forces that keep the world turning. Marcus was already awake, sitting in the control room, staring at the AM receiver with an expression I could not quite read. He told me to listen. He had been scanning frequencies, he said, just to see what was out there, and he had found something, a voice, faint and crackling, but unmistakably a voice. He turned up the volume, and I heard it too. A woman's voice, speaking slowly and carefully, like she was trying to make sure every word was understood. She was not broadcasting a message to anyone in particular. She was talking to herself, or to the air, or to whoever might be listening. She was describing her surroundings, the room she was in, the view from her window. She sounded exhausted, the way people sound when they have been talking for a long time without any response. I sat down in the chair and turned the dial, trying to get a clearer signal. The voice wavered in and out, lost in static, and then emerging again like a ship breaking through fog. I caught snatches of what she was saying. She mentioned a radio station like mine, a small building on the edge of a town. She mentioned a generator, one that had just run out of fuel. She mentioned that she was alone, that she had been alone for a week, that she was not sure how much longer she could keep going. I tried to respond. I tried to reach her on the same frequency, to let her know that someone was listening, that she was not alone. But the signal was too weak, too inconsistent. She could not hear me. She kept talking, unaware that her voice was reaching someone else, unaware that there was another person out there in the darkness, listening to her words and wishing they could respond. We tried for hours. Marcus and I took turns adjusting the dials, trying to find the exact frequency, trying to boost the signal. I even went down to the basement to check the generator, to make sure it was running at full capacity, but nothing worked. The connection was too fragile, too unreliable. We could hear her, but she could not hear us. She was out there somewhere, alone in a building like mine, speaking into the void and receiving nothing in return. I have been thinking about her all day. I do not know her name. I do not know where she is, or what she looks like, or what she is feeling. But I know what it is like to be alone in a silent building, to talk to the empty air and wonder if anyone is listening. I know the weight of that silence, the way it presses down on you until you feel like you are suffocating. And I know the small, desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might hear your voice and respond. I have decided that I am going to find her. I do not know how, yet. The signal is too weak for us to pinpoint her location, and we do not have the equipment to trace it. But there has to be a way. There has to be some method, some technique that will allow us to figure out where she is and how to reach her. I have been going through the storage rooms again, looking for anything that might help. I found an old directional antenna, the kind that was used for long-distance communication in the days before satellites. Marcus is working on it now, trying to repair the wiring and get it operational. In the meantime, we have been working on the garden. It is a small thing, a tiny rebellion against the darkness that has settled over everything. We cleared the weeds and turned the soil, working side by side in the gray light. Marcus showed me how to plant the seeds, how deep to put them, how far apart to space them. He talked about soil and water and sunlight, and I listened and tried to remember everything he said. We planted the first rows today, vegetables that will take weeks to grow, but that will be worth the wait. I felt a strange kind of peace as I worked, a calm that I had not felt in days. There is something about putting your hands in the soil, about planting something and knowing that it will grow, that makes the world feel less broken. Marcus has been talking more about his life before all of this. He had a family once, he said, a wife and 2 children. They lived in a small house in a small town, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone and nothing ever changes. He said he loved them, but he also loved the road, and that was the problem. He was gone for weeks at a time, always driving, always moving, always chasing the next destination. He thought he had more time. He thought he could come back to them when he was ready, when he had gotten the road out of his system. But the road never left his system, and now it is too late. He does not know what happened to them. He was on the road when the world went silent, and by the time he could make his way back, the small town was empty and the house was dark. He searched for them for days, he said, looking in every room, calling their names into the silence, but they were gone. He does not know if they left or if something happened to them. He does not know if they are alive or dead. He just knows that they are not there, and that he has to live with that. I did not know what to say to him. What can you say to someone who has lost everything, who is carrying that weight and still getting up every morning and working on a garden and trying to help a stranger? I told him I was sorry. I told him I understood, even though I do not. I have never had a family like that. I have never had someone to lose. I have been alone for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to be connected to another person. And now, sitting in this building with Marcus, listening to the faint voice of a woman who does not know we are here, I am beginning to understand what I have been missing. The directional antenna is almost ready. Marcus says it will take a few more hours to finish the repairs, but then we can try to get a better fix on her signal. I am trying not to get my hopes up. I am trying to stay practical, to remember that this might not work, that we might never be able to find her. But I cannot help it. I keep thinking about her voice, about the way she sounded when she said she was alone. I keep thinking about what it would mean to reach her, to tell her that she is not the only one still alive. I have been thinking about the responsibility that comes with this. If we find her, if we figure out where she is, and find a way to reach her, then what? We have enough food and water for the 3 of us, at least for now. But there is not enough for everyone. There will never be enough for everyone. The world is smaller now, more fragile, and every new person we bring into it is another mouth to feed, another person to protect. I do not know if we can handle that. I do not know if I can handle that. But I also know that I cannot leave her out there alone. I cannot hear her voice, that desperate voice calling into the void, and pretend that I did not hear it. I cannot close my ears and turn away. That is not who I am. That is not who I want to be. This is Charles, still broadcasting from WKRL 94.7 and AM. The time is late evening, and the woman on the frequency is still out there somewhere, still talking, still waiting for someone to respond. I am going to find her. I do not know how, but I am going to find her. Marcus finished the directional antenna late in the afternoon. It is not a beautiful piece of equipment. It looks like something that was assembled from scraps and hope, which is exactly what it was. He used copper wire and old metal rods he found in the storage room, and he spent hours carefully measuring and attaching each piece. When he was done, he carried it up to the roof and mounted it on the old antenna pole that had been there since the station was built. It swayed slightly in the wind, but it held. We spent the evening trying to find her again. The AM receiver was tuned to the frequency where we had heard her voice, and we both sat in the control room, listening to the static, waiting for her to speak. Hours passed. The static continued, that familiar hiss that I had grown almost comfortable with. And then, just as I was starting to lose hope, her voice emerged again. Faint and fragile, like a candle flame in a draft, but unmistakably there. She was talking about the weather. It was a mundane thing to talk about, but I realized that it was also the only thing she could talk about. The weather was the one thing that had not changed, the one thing that still operated according to the old rules. She said it had been raining, that the rain had been falling for 2 days, that she had been sitting in her building listening to it and wondering if it would ever stop. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, like she was afraid of being overheard. I turned to the directional antenna. Marcus had shown me how to use it, how to turn it slowly and listen for the signal to strengthen or weaken. I stood at the receiver, my hand on the dial, and I turned the antenna a fraction of a degree. The signal grew slightly clearer. I turned it again, and her voice became a little stronger. I kept turning, slowly, carefully, until the signal was as clear as it was going to get. Then I looked at the markings on the antenna mount and noted the direction. South. She was to the south of us. I did not know how far, but I knew the direction. It was not much, but it was something. It was a starting point. Marcus and I sat down and looked at the maps I had found in one of the storage rooms. They were old maps, the kind that were printed on paper and folded into neat rectangles, the kind that showed every road and town and landmark in the region. We traced a line south from our location, following the path of the signal, trying to guess how far it might have traveled. There were dozens of towns and cities along that line, hundreds of buildings, thousands of potential locations, but it was still more than we had before. We decided to try again tomorrow, to refine the signal and get a more precise reading. For now, we had a direction. We had hope. I have been thinking about her more tonight, as I sit here in the control room, listening to the hum of the generator and the faint static of the receiver. I have been thinking about what it will be like to meet her, if we ever find her. What will she look like? What will she say? Will she be relieved to see us, or will she be afraid? I do not know anything about her, except that she is alone, and she is scared, and she is still talking, still reaching out, still refusing to give up. Marcus came in to check on me a little while ago. He was carrying a cup of water, and he set it down on the desk beside me without saying anything. He stood there for a moment, looking at the receiver, listening to the static. Then he said that he thought we would find her. He said it with such certainty that I almost believed him. He is a different kind of person than I am, more optimistic, more willing to believe that things will work out. I envy that quality in him. I wish I had more of it. He told me about the garden, too. He said the seeds we planted are already starting to show signs of life. Tiny green shoots pushing through the soil, reaching toward the sky. It is too early to know if they will survive, but they are trying. That is what matters, he said, that they are trying. I think about that now, about how we are all trying, in our own ways. The plants, reaching toward the light. The woman on the frequency, reaching out with her voice. Marcus, walking through a dead world, looking for something to hold on to. Me, sitting in this chair, talking into a microphone, hoping that someone is listening. The directional antenna is still mounted on the roof, waiting for tomorrow. I have been going over the maps, trying to narrow down the possibilities. There is a town about 50 miles south of us, a small place that I have never visited, but that I have seen on the maps. It is not a large town, not the kind of place that would have a functioning radio station, but it is a place. It is a building. It is somewhere that she could be. I have also been thinking about the logistics of traveling. If we find her, If we pinpoint her location, we will need to go to her. She cannot come to us. She does not have a working vehicle, and she is too far away to walk. Marcus's old truck is still parked outside, the one he found on the road and drove to the station. It is not in great condition, but it runs, and it has enough fuel to get us there and back. We have been saving it for exactly this kind of situation. I do not know if we will find her. I do not know if she will still be there when we arrive, but I have to try. I cannot stay here and listen to her voice fading into the static and do nothing. That is not who I am anymore. That is not who I want to be. The night is quiet, the building is still, except for the hum of the generator and the soft hiss of the receiver. I am going to stay here for a while longer, listening to the static, waiting for her voice to return. And then I am going to sleep, and when I wake up, I am going to work on finding her. This is Charles, still broadcasting from WCarol 94.7 in AM. The time is late night, and the woman on the frequency is somewhere to the south, and I am going to find her, because that is what you do when you hear someone calling out in the dark. You answer. You do not always know what you will find, but you answer anyway. We left at dawn. Marcus had the truck running before I was even fully awake, the old engine coughing and sputtering in the cold morning air. I packed what we would need: water, food, the maps, a first aid kit, a flashlight that still worked, though the batteries were getting low. I stood in the doorway of the station for a long moment, looking back at the building that had been my home for so many days. It looked different in the gray light, smaller somehow, less like a fortress, and more like a structure that had been abandoned to the elements. Marcus was already in the driver's seat, waiting. He did not say anything. He did not need to. We both knew what we were doing and why. I climbed into the passenger seat and closed the door, and the sound of it clicking shut felt final, like the closing of a chapter. The drive was slow, the roads were littered with stopped cars, the same frozen tableau I had seen on that first day, but now there were also signs of decay. Some of the cars had been stripped of parts, their hoods open, and their insides exposed. Others had been pushed to the side, clearing a narrow path for the few vehicles that could still move. We drove in silence, navigating around the obstacles, following the line on the map that led south. I watched the landscape change as we traveled. The city gave way to suburbs, and the suburbs gave way to farmland. The fields were empty. The crops that had been planted before the world went quiet now brown and withered. There were farmhouses in the distance, their windows dark and their doors closed. I wondered who had lived there, where they had gone, whether they were still alive somewhere. Marcus pointed out a few things along the way. A water tower, its metal sides rusted and its base covered in graffiti. A school bus, abandoned in the middle of the road, its windows shattered and its tires flat. A church, its steeple leaning at a dangerous angle, as if it had been struck by something. He did not say much, just pointed and nodded, and I followed his gaze and tried to understand what he was showing me. We stopped in a small town around midday. There was a gas station on the corner, its pumps dry and its windows broken. Marcus pulled the truck into the parking lot and turned off the engine. We sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. The town was empty, as far as we could tell. The streets were still, the buildings dark, the only sound the wind moving through the spaces where people used to live. We got out and walked through the town. It was a strange experience, moving through a place that had been abandoned so suddenly. There were signs of life everywhere, but it was life that had stopped in the middle of a moment. A bicycle lying on its side in a front yard. A coffee cup on a picnic table, still half full. A pair of shoes outside a door, as if someone had taken them off and never put them back on. I felt like we were walking through a museum, a display of what the world had been before it ended. We found a grocery store on the main street. The doors were open, and the shelves were mostly empty, but there were a few things left. Canned goods, mostly, the kinds of things that people had not thought to take. We filled our bags with what we could carry and brought them back to the truck. It was not much, but it was something. It was supplies that might make a difference. We continued south. The directional antenna was still mounted on the truck, and I kept the receiver tuned to her frequency, listening for her voice. She had not spoken since the night before, and I was starting to worry. I kept the volume low, just loud enough to hear if she came through, and I stared at the road ahead and tried not to think about what it would mean if we lost her completely. The sun was starting to set when we reached the town I had circled on the map. It was a small place, even smaller than I had expected, just a collection of buildings clustered around a central intersection. There was a church, a post office, a few houses, and a building that might have been a radio station but might have been something else entirely. The building was dark, just like everything else, and I felt my heart sink. Marcus pulled the truck to a stop in front of the building. We sat there for a moment, looking at it, trying to decide what to do. Then I opened my door and stepped out. The air was cold, colder than it had been in the city, and I pulled my coat tighter around myself. I walked toward the building, my footsteps loud in the silence. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. It was dark, but there was enough light coming through the windows to see the outlines of furniture, the shape of a desk, the curve of a chair. I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. There was no response. I called again, louder this time, and I heard something, a faint sound, coming from the back of the building. I followed the sound. It led me through a hallway and into a room that had been set up as a living space. There was a cot in the corner, a small table with a lamp on it, and a woman sitting on the floor, her back against the wall. She was holding a radio in her hands, a small portable model, and she was crying. I stood in the doorway, not sure what to say. She looked up at me, and her eyes widened. She did not speak. She just stared at me, like she was trying to understand what she was seeing. I told her my name. I told her I had heard her voice on the frequency, that I had followed her signal, that I was here to help. She did not say anything for a long time. She just kept staring at me, her tears still falling, her hands still gripping the radio. Then she spoke. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. She asked if I was real. She asked if she was dreaming. I told her I was real. I told her she was not alone. I told her that Marcus was outside, that we had a truck, that we could take her somewhere safe. She stood up slowly, unsteadily, and I saw that she was thinner than I had expected, thinner than anyone should be. She had been running out of food, I realized. She had been running out of everything. I helped her walk out of the building. Marcus was waiting by the truck, and when he saw her, he opened the back door and helped her inside. She sat there, looking at us both, her hands still holding the radio. She did not speak again until we were back on the road, heading north, leaving the dark building behind. She told us her name was Elena. She told us she had been a nurse, that she had been working at a hospital in the city when everything happened. She had walked for days, she said, trying to find somewhere safe, trying to find anyone who was still alive. She had found the radio station in the small town and had been broadcasting on the frequency, hoping that someone would hear her. She said she had given up hope. She said she had been sitting on the floor of that room, holding the radio, ready to stop talking, ready to let the silence take her. And then she had heard my voice. She had heard me responding to her broadcast, telling her that I was coming, that she was not alone. I told her that I had not heard her response. I told her that I had not been sure she could hear me. She said she had heard me, faintly, through the static. She said she had heard me tell her that I was going to find her, and she had waited. We drove through the night, the three of us, heading back toward the station. The road was dark, but the truck's headlights cut through the darkness, and the engine hummed steadily. Elena fell asleep in the back seat, her head against the window, the radio still clutched in her hands. Marcus was quiet, focused on the road, his face illuminated by the dim glow of the dashboard lights. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the darkness pass by, thinking about what we had done. We had found her. We had followed her voice through the static, had driven through a dead world, and we had found her. She was alive. She was with us. I do not know what comes next. I do not know if we will find more people, or if this is all that is left. But for now, she is here, and she is safe, and that is enough. This is Charles, broadcasting from the road, heading back to the station with Elena and Marcus. The time is late night, and we are not alone anymore. Elena slept for almost an entire day after we brought her back to the station. She had been surviving on very little food and almost no water, and her body needed time to recover. Marcus and I took turns watching over her, making sure she drank water when she woke up, making sure she ate small amounts of the canned food we had stored. She was weak, but she was alive, and that was what mattered. When she finally woke up fully, she was different than the woman we had found on the floor of that dark building. She was sharper, more present, more aware of her surroundings. She asked about the station, about how we had managed to keep it running, about the garden and the generator and the equipment. She asked about Marcus and about me, about who we had been before all of this. She was a nurse, and it showed in the way she approached everything. She was practical and methodical, always thinking about what needed to be done and how to do it. She told us more about what had happened to her. She had been working a night shift at the hospital when the power went out. The backup generators had kicked in, but they had only lasted for a few hours before they failed. The patients in the intensive care unit had been the first to go, she said. The ones who needed machines to breathe, machines to keep their hearts beating. She had tried to save them, had tried to keep them alive with nothing but her hands and her knowledge, but it had not been enough. One by one, they had died, and she had watched them go. She had left the hospital when it became clear that there was nothing more she could do. She had walked through the dark streets, past the stopped cars and the silent buildings, looking for anyone who was still alive. She had found a few people, here and there, but they were all as lost as she was. She had kept walking, kept searching, until she found the radio station in the small town. She had been there for almost 2 weeks, broadcasting on the AM frequency, hoping that someone would hear her voice and respond. Now she is here, and she is helping. She has been going through the first aid kits, organizing the supplies, making lists of what we have and what we need. She has been checking our health, making sure we are not getting sick, making sure we are drinking enough water and eating enough food. She has been teaching us things we did not know, about hygiene and nutrition and the signs of illness. She is the kind of person who needs to be useful, and I am grateful for that. I am grateful for everything she brings to this place. We have been discussing what comes next. The generator is still running, but we are running low on fuel. We have enough for a few more weeks, maybe a month if we are careful, but then we will be back to relying on the emergency transmitter battery. Marcus has been talking about finding more fuel, about going out to search for it, but I have been hesitant. The world outside is dangerous, and I do not want to lose anyone else. Elena has a different perspective. She says that staying here, hiding in this building, is not a sustainable solution. She says we need to think about the long term, about how we are going to survive when the fuel runs out, and the food runs out, and the batteries die. She says we need to find other people, to build a community, to create something that can last. She is right, I know. I have been avoiding that truth because it is easier to stay here, in this familiar space, with these familiar routines. But the world is not going to wait for us to be ready. We have been working on the garden together, the three of us. Elena has been helping Marcus with the planting, using her knowledge of nutrition to guide what we grow. She says we need to focus on vegetables that are high in vitamins, that will keep us healthy even if we are eating less than we used to. She has been reading the seed packets, calculating planting times and harvest schedules, planning for the months ahead. It is strange to think about the future, to plan for a time when we might still be here, still alive, still trying to survive. I have been spending time on the radio again, broadcasting on both frequencies, telling anyone who is listening that we are here, that we are alive, that we are willing to help. I have not heard any other voices, not since Elena's, but I keep broadcasting anyway. It is something to do. It is a way of reaching out, of refusing to accept that we are alone in this world. Marcus has been working on the truck, making repairs, checking the fuel lines and the engine. He says we are going to need it, that we are going to have to go out again, to search for supplies and for other survivors. I do not want to go. I want to stay here, in this building, with these walls and this roof and this small patch of garden. But I know that is not the right choice. I know that we have to keep moving, keep searching, keep refusing to give up. Elena came to me tonight, after Marcus had gone to sleep. She sat down in the chair beside me, the one that has been empty for so long, and she asked me what I was thinking. I told her I was thinking about the future, about what comes next. She nodded and said she thought about that too, all the time. She said she thought about the patients she had lost, about the people she had not been able to save. She said she thought about the world that was gone, the world that would never come back. She said something that has been sticking with me. She said that grief is not a straight line. It loops back on itself, it doubles over, it takes you by surprise. She said that we are all grieving, all of us, in our own ways. We are grieving for the world that was, for the lives we had, for the people we lost, and we cannot rush that grief. We cannot pretend it does not exist. I asked her if she thought we would ever be okay. I asked her if she thought we would ever find a way to be happy again in this new world that is so different from the old one. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said that she did not know. She said that happiness is not the same thing as survival, but that survival is a place to start. She said that we have each other, and that has to count for something. I am still thinking about what she said. I am still trying to understand what it means to survive, to keep going, to find a reason to wake up every morning. I am not sure I have found that reason yet, but I am still here. I am still talking. I am still reaching out. This is Charles, broadcasting from WKRL 94.7 and AM. The time is late evening, and Elena is asleep in the break room, and Marcus is dreaming somewhere in the back of the building, and I am sitting in the control room, watching the gray light fade to black, thinking about the future and the past, and all the things we have lost, and all the things we still have to find. Something has shifted in the air around us. I cannot explain it, not exactly, but I feel it in the way the building settles at night, in the way the wind moves through the empty streets, in the way we all move around each other with a new kind of awareness. We are not just three people surviving in a dead building anymore. We are becoming something else. A community, perhaps, a family. I do not know the right word for it, but I know it is happening. It started with the broadcast. I have been sending out the signal every day, on both frequencies, telling anyone who can hear me that we are here, that we have food and water and shelter, that we are willing to help. And for a long time, there was nothing. Just the static, just the silence, just the sound of my own voice echoing back at me. But then, a few days ago, someone responded. A man's voice, crackling and distant, asking if I was real. His name is Daniel. He is a farmer, or he was a farmer, before the world ended. He has been living on his land, growing what he can, surviving on the animals he had before everything went dark. He heard my broadcast on an old radio in his barn, and he walked for 2 days to find us. When he arrived, he was tired and hungry and covered in dust, but he was alive. He was carrying a bag of potatoes, his last harvest, and he offered them to us like they were gold. We welcomed him. Of course we welcomed him. That is what we do now. We open our doors and we let people in, because that is the only way we are going to survive. We have been showing him the garden, introducing him to the others, explaining how we have been managing. He has been quiet, mostly, observing and learning, but I can see the gratitude in his eyes. He was alone for so long, just like all of us were, and now he is not. Daniel has already made himself useful. He knows about soil and crops and the rhythms of the seasons. He has been working with Marcus in the garden, teaching him things he did not know, suggesting new plants we could grow. He says there is a field not far from here, a field that used to be planted with corn before everything happened. He says we could use that field if we had the seeds and the tools and the will to work it. He says we could grow enough to feed 12 people, maybe more. That word, more, has been sitting in my mind. More people, more mouths to feed, more hands to work, more voices to fill the silence. It is a terrifying word, because it means change, and change is something I have been avoiding for as long as I can remember. But it is also a hopeful word, because it means we are not just surviving. We are building something. We are creating a future, even if that future is different from anything we could have imagined. Elena has been talking to Daniel about the medical supplies. She says we need more, that what we have is not enough for a growing group. She has been making a list, writing down everything she would need to treat injuries and illnesses. And she has been asking Daniel if he knows of any place where we might find more supplies. He said there is a small clinic in the town near his farm, a clinic that might still have some of its stock left. He said he could take us there, if we were willing to make the trip. I have been hesitating. I do not like the idea of leaving the station, of venturing out into that dead world again, but I know we need the supplies. I know we cannot stay here forever, pretending that the world outside does not exist. I have been thinking about the other groups we have heard about, the other survivors who are out there, scattered across the landscape like seeds blown by the wind. I have been thinking about how we are going to find them, how we are going to bring them together, how we are going to create something that can last. Marcus has been talking about the truck, about the repairs he has been making. He says it is ready for another trip, that the engine is strong and the fuel tank is full. He says we could leave tomorrow, if we wanted to. He says he will go with me, if I decide to go. He says he is not afraid. I believe him. I believe he is not afraid. But I am afraid, and I am trying to find a way to live with that fear, to let it exist alongside the hope that is also growing inside me. I have been thinking about what Elena said, about grief not being a straight line. I think fear is the same way. It loops back on itself, it doubles over, it takes you by surprise, and you cannot wait for it to go away. You have to move forward despite it. Daniel has been telling us stories about his farm, about the animals he used to have and the crops he used to grow. He said he had a dog, a loyal old dog who followed him everywhere. He said the dog stayed with him for the first few days after the world went silent, and then one morning he woke up and the dog was gone. He searched for hours, calling its name, but he never found it. He said he still wonders where the dog went, whether it is still alive somewhere, whether it found another person to follow. I think about that dog sometimes, when I am sitting in the control room, listening to the static. I think about all the things we have lost, the small things and the big things, the things we did not know we were going to miss. I think about the dog, wandering through that dead world, searching for someone to love. And I think about how we are all like that dog, in our own way. We are all searching for something, for someone, for a reason to keep going. I have been talking to the others about what comes next. We have been having these conversations late at night, sitting in the break room with the lantern flickering and the generator humming in the background. We have been talking about the future, about the world we are going to build, about the things we want to create. It is not always easy, we do not always agree, but we are talking, and that is what matters. Marcus says we should focus on the immediate needs, on the food, and the water, and the shelter. He says we cannot think about the future until we have secured the present. Elena says we need to think about the long term, about the community we are going to build, about the systems we are going to create. Daniel says we need to find more people, to bring them together, to create something that can withstand whatever comes next. I listen to them all, and I try to find a middle ground, a path that we can all walk together. We are not alone anymore. We have each other, and we have the station, and we have the garden, and we have the hope that is growing in the space between us. That has to be enough. That has to be enough to carry us through whatever comes next. This is Charles, broadcasting from WCarl 94.7 and AM. The time is late night, and Daniel is asleep in the new room we have set up for him, and Marcus is in the basement checking the generator, and Elena is in the break room making her lists, and I am sitting in the control room, listening to the static, thinking about the future and the past and all the things we still have to find. I have been sitting in this chair for most of the night, watching the gray light begin to creep through the windows, thinking about what I am going to say. The others are asleep, Daniel in his room, Marcus on the couch in the break room, Elena curled up on the floor of the control room with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. They are all trusting me to make the right decision, and I am not sure I know what that decision is. The direction of the narrative has changed, and I have not been entirely honest about the conflict that is beginning to form among us. It started with Daniel. He has been talking about leaving, not leaving the station, but leaving this region entirely. He says there are other places out there, places that might be better, places where the soil is richer, and the water is cleaner, and the world is not quite so broken. He says we should gather everything we can carry and head west, toward the mountains, toward the places that were always less populated, less dependent on the systems that failed us. Marcus does not want to go. He says we have built something here, something real, something that is worth protecting. He says the station is our home now, and we cannot just abandon it. He says we have the garden, and the generator, and the transmitter, and those are things that cannot be replaced. He says we should stay here, and keep building, keep growing, keep reaching out to other survivors. Elena is caught in the middle. She sees the logic in both arguments, and she has been trying to find a compromise. She says we should send out scouts, people who can explore the surrounding areas and report back on what they find. She says we should not make any decisions until we have more information. She says we should be patient, careful, deliberate. And I am the one who has to choose. I am the one who has to decide what we do next. I have been thinking about what it means to be a leader, what it means to have people looking to you for answers. I never asked for this role. I never wanted it. I was just a man who worked the night shift, who liked the quiet, who was content to be alone. But now I am not alone anymore, and I cannot pretend that I am. I have to make decisions that will affect all of us. I have to think about the future, about what is best for everyone, not just for myself. I have been thinking about the world that was, the world that is gone. I have been thinking about the things we have lost and the things we still have. I have been thinking about the woman on the frequency, the one we found in that dark building, the one who is now sleeping in the corner of this room. I have been thinking about Marcus, who walked through a dead world to find us, who brought his knowledge and his hope and his stubborn refusal to give up. I have been thinking about Daniel, who carried his potatoes through the empty fields, who offered us his last harvest without hesitation. We are not just a group of survivors anymore. We are a community. We are people who have chosen to be together, to help each other, to build something new out of the ruins of the old world. And that is worth protecting. That is worth fighting for. I have decided that we are going to stay. I do not say this lightly. I have weighed the arguments, considered the possibilities, thought about the risks and the rewards, and I have come to the conclusion that this place is where we belong. The station is not perfect. It is old and drafty, and the generator is running low on fuel, but it is ours. We built this. We made this into something that matters. I have also decided that we are going to send out scouts, just as Elena suggested. Not to leave permanently, but to explore, to find out what is out there, to connect with other groups and other survivors. We cannot stay hidden forever. We cannot pretend that the world outside does not exist. We have to reach out, to build connections, to create the kind of network that will allow us to survive in the long term. I have been thinking about what Elena said about the patients she lost, about the people she could not save. I have been thinking about what Marcus said about his family, about the house that was empty when he returned. I have been thinking about what Daniel said about his dog, about the silence that followed when it left. We have all lost so much, and we are all carrying that loss with us. But we are also carrying something else. We are carrying hope. I told them this morning. I gathered them all in the control room, and I told them what I had decided. Daniel was quiet for a long time, and I thought he might argue with me. But then he nodded and said he understood. He said he would stay, at least for now. Marcus smiled, a tired smile, but a smile nonetheless. He said he was glad I had made a choice. Elena reached out and touched my arm, a small gesture of support that meant more than words could express. I am still afraid. I am still uncertain. I do not know if I made the right decision, and I will probably never know for sure. But I made a decision, and that is what matters. I chose something. I chose us. The radio is still broadcasting, the signal still reaching out into the darkness. I do not know if anyone is listening. I do not know if we will ever hear another voice. But I am going to keep talking. I am going to keep reaching out. I am going to keep believing that we are not alone. We are going to stay here, in this old building, with this old equipment, with this old generator that is still running. We are going to keep planting seeds in the garden, keep fixing the truck, keep making our lists and our plans. We are going to send out scouts to explore the world beyond our walls. We are going to find other survivors, other communities, other people who are still trying, and we are going to build something. Something that can last, something that can survive. The sun is rising now, the light growing stronger through the windows. I can see the garden from here, the green shoots that Daniel has been tending, the rows of vegetables that are growing day by day. I can see the truck, the old truck that Marcus has been fixing, the truck that will carry us out into the world. I can see Elena, standing in the doorway, looking at the sky. She is not looking at the gray. She is looking at the light. She is looking for something to hold on to. I am going to keep broadcasting. I am going to keep talking. I am going to keep reaching out, because that is what we do now. That is who we are. This is Charles, broadcasting from WKRL 94.7 and AM. The sun is rising, and we are still here, and we are not going anywhere. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. We are going to stay, and we are going to build, and we are going to survive. That is the choice I have made. That is the choice we are all going to live with. The signal is fading now, the light is growing stronger, and I have said everything I need to say, at least for now. This has been Charles, from the radio station at the edge of the world. Keep listening, keep hoping, keep believing that there is still something out there worth finding. And if you are out there, if you can hear me, please know that we are here, we are alive, and we are waiting for you. Good night, goodbye, for now.